Hopefully, did
Yep,
you see it? Yeah.
it says recording in process. Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Carlin. I am, among other jobs here at SUNY Press, I'm an acquisitions editor in for our education list. Um, we're really excited to host this first ever webinar for us. One of our missions at SUNY Press is to serve the SUNY system and to serve New York more generally, and to serve the education world across the country. So we have many missions. Chris has put together what I think is a wonderful, very student-friendly new textbook called Foundations of American Education, 10 Questions for New Teachers, which is structured around some of the typical questions that people who are studying to become teachers have. And one of those questions is, how should public school teachers respond to current events? And we thought this was a pretty timely topic. So we invited Chris to give us a short presentation, sort of an overview. As Tanya said, he'll run through this. Um, and as you have questions, if you want to type them in the chat or make a note, then we will stop recording so you can feel free to have an open discussion um, following the presentation. So I'm very pleased to introduce one of my favorite authors, Chris Wilkens.
Uh, Tanya, Richard, thank you so much. And all of you, huge note of gratitude for what you do. Instructors out there at the university level preparing teacher candidates, you do work near and dear to my heart. If there are teacher candidates preparing to go do the work, you are about to start the best work I know, which is getting our children ready for what comes next in their own adulthoods. The work's hard. Like Richard said, the book is structured around questions. You'll see that the questions we ask are not simple ones. Like today's question, how should public school teachers respond to current events? There's no quick one-word answer, but I hope today we get to explore a couple of approaches you might take. So just quick note on me, just so you know who this talking floating head is in front of you. My name is Chris Wilkens. I work at SUNY Brockport by trade. I am a high school science and special education teacher with experience in New York, Massachusetts, Alaska, and Mississippi. So that's me in like 12 seconds. I wrote the book and do foundations coursework at my institution. A big part of the goal is to meet New York State standards, but if you're working in another context, I know we've got folks from Indiana, North Carolina, and other places here. Just so it's explicit, part of what we do in foundations is get teachers ready for handling some specific rights and responsibilities. So heads up, what we're talking about today is rooted in chapter 9 of my book, and it's about school law and ethics, rights and responsibilities. Um, and that dopey guy over there on the right scarfing bread, that's me back in the day. I'm still there. I'm older, still like bread. So no further ado, one of the first questions that a lot of my teacher candidates seek to explore, and I'm right there with them, is when and why should K-12 teachers discuss current events? You all know that students bring their whole selves to our classrooms. They see the news, they are informed about current events. Their friends, their loved ones share stories with them. And there are a lot of compelling and sometimes scary stories out there in the world that they will bring. So the short answer, the way that I address this with my own teacher candidates is that it is appropriate for teachers to talk about current events in their classrooms with their K-12 or P-12 students when there are academic or emotional needs. So what do I mean by that? Well, if there is a connection to standards that you are teaching, it's appropriate, right? If you can link your job, the job of teaching, to specific concrete standards and current events work into that, then it's fine. Couple of caveats to that coming in just a second. But if there are clear connections to academic standards, you are in good shape, you are treading on stable ground. Or if students bring to you emotional needs that we as teachers responsibly should address, that is fair as well. And so the question that I encourage my teacher candidates to think about, hey, a kid's asking me about something. Do we need to discuss this right now in order for students to learn or feel safe? The classic example that always comes up in my room is about school shootings. Are we safe here at school? That isn't an academic standard pretty much anywhere, but it is an emotional need that students feel as a real live thing. And I do think that we as teachers, as responsible adults, can address that in terms of helping our students feel safe. So is there an academic or an emotional need that you can connect? I won't go into great detail, but if you look at the bottom of the slide, there are 3 pictures of current events. One, I live in New York. I'm a Bills fan. There's a picture of Josh Allen about to get sacked. That's a current event, right? In the middle there, that is a photo of flooding in Kipnuk, Alaska. So the remnants of a big typhoon in the Pacific just essentially destroyed an entire village in Western Alaska where I work. And so that is an event that kids might bring and say, hey, this happened. Can we talk about it? And down there on the bottom right is a photo from Ukraine, the aftermath of a missile attack on a kindergarten. So how would you, as a teacher, handle discussions if students brought them to you of sports, of natural disasters, or of current events that deeply and terribly impact people in the world? So thought experiment for you now, because I'm talking, we'll do Q&A in a minute, but think about your own practice and think about in the middle of math class, in the middle of 3rd grade, would it be appropriate to talk about sports, disasters, current events? Could they connect to academic standards? Could they connect to the emotional needs of young people for which we are responsible? Kids will bring tough stuff up. There are a lot of divisive issues in the news, in current events. I know one thing we talked about in class on Monday night was our own Secretary of Education saying, hey, schools are still open, therefore the department is not a necessary thing. So how do we address those tough things with our kids in real time? They bring them up. They don't bring them up to be difficult. They bring them up because they are real, they are felt, they're important, and they want to know what the adults around them think. So the way that I talk to my own teacher candidates about this, these are college students preparing to go teach themselves, is I tell them to be careful, number one. Just because students are asking us our opinions doesn't mean that we should share them, right? So when kids ask, the first instinct that I share is to be careful, and not careful in the sense of like being coy or shy or not telling them anything and just being a robot teacher. It's more careful in terms of figuring out their personal opinions about things and their professional roles and responsibilities. So what are they supposed to do as teachers? What would they want teachers of their nieces and nephews to do? What would they want teachers of their own children to do? So the first instinct that I share with them is be careful, right? Figure out what's important to you personally, and that may or may not be connected to your teaching obligations, but also be sure you're clear on what your professional role is as a teacher of everyone. And then also to be responsible. So what do I mean by being responsible when kids bring up divisive issues? Well, top of the list, we don't need to discuss everything just because students ask. A classic example of this was the assassination of Charlie Kirk a few weeks ago. Students brought it up. They were interested in discussing it. Do my personal opinions connect to academic standards or professional ethics in leading them to how I think about it? No. So just because the student asks doesn't mean it's a topic that we all need to discuss in public with a full classroom. But I think ethically, we do owe students two things when they bring up tough stuff. We owe them the truth, right? And that can be surprisingly difficult to parse right now. So to the extent that you know it, we owe students that. If there are things that you know that happened, that are true, that are real, those are worth seeking. We are educators. That's our responsibility. And we owe them reassurance. And by that, I'm generally focusing on the emotional side, right? If students are upset, if they feel unsafe, if they feel threatened by what's happening or things that they've heard, we owe them some amount of reassurance because they're in a school setting, and that is about the safest place that many of our students can possibly be, sometimes compared to home, sometimes compared to transportation, the streets outside of school. Statistically speaking, school is a physically safe place, but part of our jobs as teachers and teacher educators is to reassure students emotionally as well. So I also tell my teacher candidates, if you don't know the truth, right? If you don't know fact, don't speculate, right? If you're not able to provide truth, facts, concrete, this is how this works, it's not our business to make stuff up or opine or guess. Teachers are seen as knowledgeable and reliable. And if we talk to students as if we know stuff that we do not, we're swaying beyond the bounds of where we should ethically be wondering. So stop, right? It is okay to pause. It's okay to put a pin on discussions. It's okay to say, you know, I can't engage with that right now, or I can't responsibly talk about that right now. I need to know more. And so I'm going to go learn more and we'll come back to it. Is an appropriate and ethical and responsible thing to do. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, mental thought exercise for all of you right now, there are three pictures. The question I'm asking is, do students need to know what we think? And I've got a little try it. The picture on the left at the bottom there is the demolition of the east wing of the White House. That's happening now. Students might ask about that. The picture at the bottom is an ICE agent outside Chicago, Illinois. Your students may be curious about, hey, what's happening there? Is it just? And down on the right is a picture from Gaza. So if your students asked you, hey, what do you think about the White House? Or, hey, what's going on with immigration and ICE agents? Or, wow, Gaza is scary and difficult. What do you think? My question for you is, do your students need to know what you think? How would you handle those questions or the news that they might bring? You know, sometimes kids will bring their phone and say, hey, have you seen this? Can you be careful and can you be responsible in handling that discussion? And so lastly, this is sort of the concluding third of the questions for my presentation. My teacher candidates are often worried, and I think justifiably so, about keeping their jobs, right? We are preparing folks who are going to be new employees, brand new baby teachers, as I refer to them. A fair question is, how can they protect their positions while still engaging their students, right? It's not engaging to be like, can't talk about it, go away, not interested. You know, that's for home, not here, all the time. So how can they engage their students in topics that matter, that are important, without putting their jobs at risk, right? Many students, many teacher candidates are worried about, you know, what if I say the wrong thing in class? Or what if somebody gets upset and talks to their parent or talks to the principal and I get in trouble? Those are fair questions. So what do I tell my teacher candidates to pay attention to? First and foremost, and I think this is ubiquitous. It's not just about engaging difficult topics. The responsibility of all teachers is to establish positive relationships and strong class norms. So before you even think about wading into anything difficult in class, you've got to know your class, right? You have to know who's there. You have to have good relationships with them. You have to know what they do, right? Are they on the volleyball team? Are they on the debate team? Do they care passionately about the environment? Do they have sort of a dubious relationship with being in your class and they need to be convinced? And part of them being convinced is who you are and how much of yourself you bring to class. Without those positive relationships and without strong class norms, for example, of listening to each other, of respecting what everybody shares, of vulnerability being okay and encouraged and safe, you haven't set the tone for discussing hard stuff. If you're not ready, don't do it. So the sort of pro tip from my end is early in the year, before you know your students, is not the time to talk about Gaza. Okay. September is not the time to talk about tough stuff. Why? Not because you're not knowledgeable or in it, but you don't know your students yet. It's too early. And so those relational bonds, the trust that everybody has good intentions or good faith and that this will be okay is not there. It's just it's too risky early on. So make sure positive relationships are in place, make sure class norms are strong. And if they're not, right, if you've got chaos in period 6 and everybody's sort of on the verge of being grumpy with each other, period 6 may not be the place for a hard discussion. That's okay, right? So part of your teacher judgment is going to be decisions about how strong is the class culture and how well do I know everybody and do I trust that I can manage this discussion with respect and integrity. So it is okay to take risks. I wouldn't take them early on before you know your students. And the other sort of pro tip that we talk about in class is to make sure that there are pretty clear ground rules if you are going to do something in public, right? If you're going to have 25 teenagers talking about Gaza, how do you make sure that that's going to be okay? Make sure that your discussions have ground rules. And I will say those ground rules shouldn't be the first time you've introduced them, right? So if you're going to talk about something tough, talk about lower stakes stuff first, right? Like we're going to practice and we're going to talk about, I don't know, what's the best kind of dog? Or are dogs better than cats? Or, are pancakes better than waffles? Practice those ground rules first before things get a little bit heavy. And so some examples of ground rules for discussions, if you're going to do a class-wide thing, are there in the bullet points. One of them, we explore lots of ideas, even ones we disagree with. It's a good idea to make it okay for kids to surface, but not necessarily own ideas, right? I have heard or others have told me is a fine way to surface ideas without it necessarily being critical to shout them down or reject them or even judge them right in the moment. We explore lots of ideas, right? We want to get all the ideas out. Where could anybody be coming from on this issue? So we explore lots of ideas as a norm. We respect each comment because we're trying to get to truth or an understanding of facts. Very critical point here. This might sound a little wonky or subtle, but the goal of discussions is not ever to win them, right? Are you ever going to convince 25 people of the same thing in 30 minutes? No, heck no, that can't be a goal. I think a much more reasonable, doable goal for all of us as teachers is learning. So make that explicit with your student. Like they don't need to leave a discussion with a sense that anybody won. Instead, a good ground rule for any discussion is we're here to learn from each other. That's why we're better doing this together. So goal is learning, not winning, right? We shouldn't walk away with a clear understanding of, well, Bob won, or Richard won, or Tanya, man, Tanya nailed it in this discussion. Not the goal, right? We can all learn something rather than there was a clear winner or clear losers. Also, especially for new teachers, I give them permission to stop, right? Just because you started a discussion doesn't mean you need to finish it right now. So if a discussion starts going sideways, if someone says something hurtful, which can happen in classrooms, if it's getting too emotional, right? Like you saw that part of the goal of having these hard discussions is they're linked to standards or there's an emotional need. If it's doing the other thing, which is causing emotional threat or harm, it's okay to stop, right? And be like, you know what? We're at a point right now where I think we need to shift up a little bit and go back to algebra. Or, you know, we're going to talk about zoning. That's the plan. And we need to get to that now. And either we'll come back to it or I'm going to learn more and bring back that learning to you later. So being willing to stop is an important norm. Thought experiment for all of you on this discussion here would be, what are your ground rules for discussions? Or what are your class norms that you found valuable for some of these hard discussions? Last point here, how do you help teacher candidates learn to do this, to talk about current events or hard stuff? My favorite approach is court cases. I love bringing up things that come out of the Supreme Court because they're national in scope, or if you have state level or district court cases that are relevant to you in Indiana or North Carolina or wherever you are. Why do I love court cases? The reason that they're in court is because they're difficult, right? There is a matter of law to be interpreted, or there are people who are in sharp disagreement about something important. So we don't need to dive into it right now, but I'm just sharing an example of a court case that I have used in my class. This is about a teacher, Georgia Clark, who taught middle school ELA in Fort Worth, Texas. She tweeted the president her views about immigration and lost her job over it. So we talk about that with my teacher candidates, not in terms of, is Georgia Clark a good or a bad person? That's not where we're going in this discussion. Instead, if you look down at the bottom where it says ask, there are some bullet points. This is how I engage with my teacher candidates. I say, well, so who fired Georgia Clark? Like, just demystify the how do school boards work? What's the point of law going on here? Like, who actually sends her a letter that says, don't come to work on Friday? Why? Because I can link that to my own standards in my foundations class. So we clarify, how does actually getting terminated as a teacher work? Why did personal tweets? I find that to be terribly interesting. It's also reassuring for my teacher candidates if they understand the mechanism here. And by way of sort of opening the bigger discussion and not just teaching about it, I ask, hey, what about Clark's help? I need protection from recrimination. My First Amendment rights are at stake here. That too is a matter of substantial academic interest, but also interest for my own teacher candidates. So I bring up the court case and then I ask them questions that are explicitly linked to the academic standards that I want to cover in my class. They themselves may have personal opinions about Georgia Clark, and they're not shy in sharing them in my class. But on my end, the thing that I think is most important for me to do as a pre-service teacher educator is to make sure they understand the basics of who, what, when, where, why, how. Their own opinion. I mean, they're grown adults, right? They're going to have opinions on their own about the worthiness of Georgia Clark's tweets. So, full stop. my presentation is done. So I think our structure here was we were going to pause or stop our recording and then open it up.